We've all been there, right? You're trying to kickstart a new project at work, or maybe just a new habit in your own life. You're trying to make a big change happen. But, as we all know, it's almost never as simple as just deciding to do something different. And that's where this whole fascinating and kind of tricky field of change management comes into play.
It's such a common story, it's almost a cliche. A company rolls out some bold new strategy, or you set this ambitious personal goal, and then you look up a few months later and what happened? Nothing. Nothing's really changed. And it's not because people aren't trying. The real truth is that change is just fundamentally hard. And figuring out why, well, that's the absolute first step to actually getting it right.
Okay, so first things first, we gotta understand that change doesn't just happen out of nowhere. It's not some random thing. It's this constant force, and it's being driven by some really specific, really powerful pressures that are always pushing us to adapt.
Now, what's really interesting here is that this pressure for change, it comes at us from two directions. On the one hand, you've got internal forces. Maybe the company needs to get more productive, or slash costs, or just, fix a system that's completely broken. But at the very same time, you've got all these external forces hammering away. Brand new technologies popping up, a competitor making a big move, or even something as huge as demographic shifts changing what customers want. It's this constant push and pull.
Okay, so if all these forces are constantly pushing for change, why doesn't it just happen? What's the roadblock? Well, it smacks right into this massive, very powerful, and very, very human wall. And that wall is called resistance. This mind map does a fantastic job of showing you just how complex managing change can be. Look at all those moving parts. But I want you to zoom in with me for a second. Look at that one branch down on the bottom right. See it? Resistance to change? That right there is the big one. It's the friction that can take the most brilliant, best-laid plans and just bring them to a grinding halt.
And here's the thing, this resistance isn't just one simple problem. It's kind of like a battle being fought on two different fronts. First, you've got the individual level. We're just wired to be a little scared of the unknown, right? We like what's comfortable, what's familiar. We worry, am I going to lose my job? Or even just, am I going to look stupid trying this new thing? Then you've got the whole organizational front. The company's own structure might be the problem, or maybe a long history of failed changes has left everyone totally skeptical.
So the big question is, how do you break through that wall? How do you get past all that resistance? Well, this is exactly where the formal practice of change management comes in. Think of it as the official playbook for navigating this really tricky landscape.
And the crucial point here is that this is not about just winging it and hoping for the best. No way. It's a deliberate, structured approach. The whole goal is to guide everyone from where they are now, point A, to where they need to be, point B. And not just to get there smoothly, but to get there in a way that actually hits the business goal you were aiming for in the first place.
And this right here, this is a huge mental shift. It's the difference between success and failure. You can't just send out a memo on a Friday afternoon and expect everyone to magically fall in line on Monday. That never works. Real, effective change management is all about understanding the human side of this whole equation. It's about being a guide, not a dictator.
All right, theory is great, but how do we actually do this? Let's get down to brass tacks and look at a couple of the most powerful, most widely used models that can guide us through this whole process.
So we have to start with the classic, the foundation of it all. We're talking about a model from social psychologist Kurt Lewin. And even though he came up with this decades ago, it is still the bedrock of how we think about change. And the reason is simple. It's just brilliantly clear and intuitive.
And this right here is the perfect way to understand it. Think about an ice cube. Let's say you want to turn that cube into an ice cone. You can't just take a hammer and smash it into a cone shape, right? It won't work. First, you have to unfreeze it. You have to melt the ice. Then you can pour the water into the new mold, that's the change, and finally you have to refreeze it to make that new shape stick. It is the absolute perfect analogy for how organizational change works.
So this whole process breaks down into three really clear stages. First up, you have unfreeze. This is all about getting the organization ready for what's coming. You have to make the case, explain why the old way of doing things just isn't cutting it anymore. Then you have the change phase itself. This is the transition where you're communicating constantly, training people, and giving them support. And finally, and you can't skip this part, you refreeze. This is where you lock in those new habits, anchor them into the company culture, and make absolutely sure people don't just slide back into their old routines.
Okay, so Lewin's model is amazing for looking at the whole organization, the big picture. But here's the catch. Change doesn't happen to an organization. It happens one person at a time. And for that, we need a different kind of tool, a different lens. And that brings us to a really useful model called AIDCAR.
80CAR is great because it breaks the individual's journey into 5 key milestones that absolutely have to happen. First is A for awareness. They have to know why the change is happening. Then D for desire. They have to want to be part of it. K's for knowledge, knowing how to change. A's for ability, having the actual skills to do it. And finally, R for reinforcement, which makes it all stick. The key takeaway here is that if even one of these steps fails for a person, their part in the change is going to fail too.
Okay, so now we have these awesome models in our toolkit. So how do we use them to deal with that big wall of resistance we talked about earlier? Well, here's a really important insight. You shouldn't think of resistance as something to be crushed. Think of it as data. It's telling you something. It's showing you where the friction is, what people are really worried about, and what they value. So the real question becomes, how do you use that data to win hearts and minds? Strategy number 1, education and communication. Look, the biggest enemy of any change is uncertainty, fear of the unknown. So this first strategy is all about fighting that fear with facts, being honest, being consistent with your communication about why this is happening and what it's going to look like. That is hands down the most powerful tool in your arsenal.
Strategy number 2 is all about participation and involvement. And this one sounds so simple, but you'd be amazed how often it's forgotten. The big idea is this: stop pushing change onto people and start pulling them into the process. Ask for their ideas. Let them help design the new way of doing things. Because when people feel like they have a say, when they help build it, they start to own it. And that's how you turn a resistor into a champion.
And strategy number 3 is facilitation and support. You just can't tell someone to change and then walk away. You have to give them the tools and the support they need to actually succeed. And yeah, that means practical things like training on a new software, but it also means emotional support, really listening to their concerns, providing coaching, and just being patient while they get the hang of it.
So if you take one thing away from all this, let it be this. Change is not a one-time event. It's not an announcement. It's not a launch day. It is a managed process. It's a journey that has to be carefully planned out, communicated clearly, and supported from the very beginning all the way to the end. It's all about guiding people through that messy, uncertain middle part to a new and hopefully better place.
So let's wrap this up with a question for you. Think about some change that's on your horizon. Could be at work, in your community, maybe even just for yourself. Based on everything we've talked about, what's the very first step you can take to start unfreezing the situation? What's one small thing you could do right now to start melting that ice cube and get people ready for what's coming next?